Have you ever felt trapped? Not by walls or iron bars, but by your own anger, your pain, or your past. Sometimes, the heaviest prisons are not made of stone. They are built within our minds, made from resentment, from memories that never fade, from wounds we never learned to heal. We all crave freedom. We think it means breaking away from what holds us back. Quitting a job, ending a relationship, running far from the place that hurt us. But true freedom, it's something deeper. It's not found in escape. It's found in release. This is the story of a man who lived behind bars for 27 long years. A man who was denied his rights, his family, his youth. Yet somehow, he never lost his light. He never allowed bitterness to become his master. His name was Nelson Mandela, and his journey redefined what it means to be free. Through darkness and despair, he discovered something powerful, that forgiveness is not weakness, and patience is not surrender. It is strength. It is liberation. Stay till the end of this story. Because what Mandela found after nearly 3 decades in prison may change the way you see your own chains and the way you walk toward your own freedom. South Africa, mid-20th century, a nation divided by color, fear, and power. The system of apartheid separated people by skin, turning neighbors into strangers and justice into privilege. In the middle of that storm stood a young lawyer named Nelson Mandela. He was not born with power or wealth, but with an unshakable belief that every human being deserved dignity. At first, Mandela thought he could change the system through law, through words, through peaceful resistance. But when laws were used as weapons and peace was answered with violence, his path grew darker. He became a symbol of defiance, a voice that refused to be silenced. And for that, the government branded him a criminal. In 1964, the sentence fell like a stone: life imprisonment. He was taken to a small, isolated cell on Robben Island, a cold concrete floor, a thin blanket, and a small barred window facing the sea. Every day began before dawn, with crushing rocks in the quarry under the burning sun. The guards called him terrorist. The world outside forgot his name. But in those early years, Mandela's heart wrestled with rage. He had fought for justice, and yet justice had caged him. At night, he would close his eyes and see the faces of his children growing up without him, and he would ask himself, was it worth it? He dreamed of freedom, not just for himself, but for his people. Yet deep down, a greater battle was beginning. To remain free inside, even when every door around him was locked. Because sometimes, the longest journey toward freedom doesn't start with breaking chains. It starts with breaking the hatred that holds the heart. Years passed in the silence of the prison yard. The sea wind cut through the iron bars, carrying both salt and sorrow. Mandela's hands were calloused from labor, his body lean from years of hunger, but his spirit still wrestled between hope and despair. It was during those long, gray mornings that he met a man who would forever shift his way of seeing. The man was older, another prisoner, once a teacher before the world turned cruel. His eyes were calm, his voice steady, as if he carried peace in a place that knew none. One day, as they worked side by side crushing stones, he said quietly, "They can chain your legs, Mandela, but only you can chain your soul." Mandela paused, sweat mixing with dust. "How can a man feel free when every sunrise begins behind bars?" he asked. The old man smiled faintly. "Freedom is not about the space you walk in. It's about the space you hold within. They can take your time, but not your choice, unless you give it to them. That night, Mandela couldn't sleep. The man's words echoed through the narrow walls of his cell. He began to watch the guards differently, to see not enemies, but frightened men trapped in their own system of hate. He realized that hatred was its own prison, one that neither side could escape unless someone chose to forgive. From that day, his thoughts changed. Each morning's labor became a meditation, each insult a test. He wrote letters not with anger, but with purpose. And in the stillness of that dark island, Mandela began to understand. True power doesn't come from taking revenge. It comes from refusing to let bitterness rule your heart. The days on Robben Island blurred into years, sun, stone, and silence. The world outside kept turning, but inside those walls, time seemed to stand still. Mandela rose each morning before dawn to the sound of metal doors slamming, the clatter of chains, and the harsh voice of guards ordering the prisoners into line. They marched to the quarry, where blinding white limestone reflected the sun like fire. The work was endless, breaking rocks that would build nothing. It was meant to break their will. At first, it almost did. Mandela's back ached, his eyes burned from the glare, and his spirit felt heavy under the weight of futility. But he remembered the old man's words. They can chain your legs, but not your soul. So he began to turn his pain into discipline. He greeted the guards politely, no matter how cruel they were. He studied their faces, not with hate, but curiosity. Who were they when they went home? Did they tell their children stories about the dangerous men on this island? Or did they feel shame when they looked in the mirror? He also became a teacher in secret. When new prisoners arrived, young men, angry and impatient, Mandela gathered them during the rare quiet hours. He taught them about strategy, about patience, about seeing the long road, not just the fight before their eyes. If we lose ourselves in hatred, he told them, then we have already lost the future we dream of. There were nights when he doubted his own words. He would think of his wife, of his children growing up without him. He wondered if they still remembered his voice. Sometimes, he could hear the ocean through the bars, whispering like a reminder that freedom existed somewhere beyond the horizon, but not yet for him. One day, a young guard insulted him, spat near his food, and called him an animal. The old Mandela might have shouted back, but this time, he only looked at the boy and said quietly, "One day, you will know better." The guard froze, not from fear, but from confusion. That moment planted a seed. Respect slowly began to replace hatred. Through small acts of dignity, Mandela began to transform the very air of the prison. The guards found themselves disarmed by his calm. Fellow prisoners looked to him for strength. Even those who had lost all hope began to believe again. Still, the test continued. Years became decades. His body aged, his hair turned gray, yet somehow his spirit grew brighter, as if every stone he broke was also breaking a piece of the bitterness inside him. And one morning, as he lifted his head toward the rising sun spilling through the iron bars, Mandela finally understood. Freedom wasn't waiting for him outside these walls. It was already here, in how he chose to see, how he chose to love, how he chose to forgive. That realization was the turning point. The man who had entered the prison angry at the world had become a man who carried peace within him. He had lost his youth, his family, his years, but he had gained something that no chain could ever hold: a liberated heart. The morning of his release came like the end of a long night. 27 years, 9,860 days, had passed since Nelson Mandela first walked into Robben Island as a prisoner. The world had changed. The struggle outside had grown louder. And yet, within him, something deeper had shifted. A quiet peace had taken root where anger once lived. When the gates opened, sunlight poured through like liquid gold. He took his first steps as a free man, the crowd cheering, cameras flashing, people crying. But Mandela's face remained calm, almost serene. Later, he would write, "As I walked out the door toward my freedom, I knew that if I didn't leave my bitterness and hatred behind, I'd still be in prison." That was his revelation. The truest kind of freedom is not found in open skies or unlocked doors. It is found in the decision to forgive. He could have called for revenge. The world would have understood if he did. But instead, he called for reconciliation. He invited his former jailers to the presidential inauguration. He shook the hands of those who once humiliated him, because he knew forgiveness doesn't excuse the wrong. It heals the wound. Mandela taught the world that freedom is not about dominating your oppressors, but about mastering yourself. When you forgive, you don't change the past. You change the future. And in real life, too, we often live in invisible prisons. We replay betrayals, cling to old wounds, or refuse to forgive those who hurt us. But as long as we carry hatred, we remain behind bars of our own making. Mandela's life whispers to us, set yourself free. Not because they deserve peace, but because you do. He waited 27 years to walk out of a physical prison, but he had already freed himself long before that day. The moment he chose compassion over vengeance and love over fear. As the world watched Nelson Mandela walk out of Victor Verster prison, the image became more than history. It became a symbol of what the human spirit can endure and what it can transcend. His steps were slow but steady, his hand raised in a silent promise to his people, not of revenge, but of renewal. For him, those 27 years had not been wasted. They had forged something indestructible inside him, a heart that refused to be shaped by hate. He emerged not as a broken man, but as one reborn through patience, faith, and forgiveness. Mandela's freedom was not about walls falling. It was about light entering. The same light that he had once seen through the narrow window of his cell now filled the world around him. And maybe that's what freedom really is. Not the end of struggle, but the transformation of it. Not the absence of pain, but the ability to rise above it. Each of us carries invisible chains, disappointments, anger, regrets. But if he could forgive after losing 27 years of his life, what might we be able to let go of today? The story of Nelson Mandela reminds us that true strength isn't loud. It's quiet. It's the moment you choose love over hatred, peace over pride. It's the courage to walk your path with grace, even when the world has given you every reason not to. So take a breath, look within, and if there's something heavy you've been carrying, maybe it's time to set it down, because that's where freedom begins. If this story of Nelson Mandela touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that forgiveness is not weakness. It's the highest form of freedom. Let this story travel beyond you. Let it reach someone still trapped in anger, someone still waiting for light to break through their darkness. And if you believe in stories that heal, that lift, that inspire, subscribe to Inspire Through Stories. Because somewhere, someone needs to hear that it's never too late to begin again, to forgive, and to walk free.